it. I like it. Now, at this point, do you guys have any questions for me?
What do you tell people when, from looking at your past self and your changes, and because I know you've worked on your healing journey, so what's the first thing that you tell people that's starting their healing journey, like when they work on themselves?
You know what? I'm glad you posed that question. One thing, my first question to anyone, very first question is I would ask them if they love themselves. Okay. And what do you think they say?
Everybody's probably tries to say yes.
Everybody does say yes. And then I would pose the question. So and this is what my mentor's done for me. So when was the last time you had unprotected sex? Or have you had unprotected sex? And I'm like, I didn't want to tell him because that was the first time anyone ever asked me, right? And I was like, well, yeah. And he said, well, did you know the person? And I'm like, well, no and yes. He said, it's a yes or a no? I had to swallow the hardest, I don't even know if it was a decision. It's like one of the hardest things ever in my world to admit to another human being that this is what I did. I'm like, but I didn't know what I was about to say to him. And I said, sure, yeah, I have. He said, well, you love yourself after, okay. And I said, well, I do. He said, so you mean to tell me a person that actually loves themselves puts themselves in harm's way, right? Because there's so many different viruses that are actually out here. So what you're telling me, let me get this right, is that you're playing Russian roulette with yourself quite often, and you're loving yourself. So and at the time I had this little revolver pistol. He said, take every bullet out and just leave one in there. And just put it to your head, because that's what you do every time to that body that you say you love. But you say you love you. Right. So it was at that point in time I realized that I did not have much love for myself. And I had to actually look back at what I was doing to me. Not to anybody else, but what I was doing to me at the time. And to get into that question, my question is, I always start out with anybody, do you love yourself? And I go in with that same question. So when's the time are you a virgin? No. So when's the last time you had unprotected sex? They probably would never say it. Then I'll say, I shouldn't ask you that. Have you ever? And the first thing they would actually say yes to that question. Now, based on the fact that they've said yes, I said, well, do you love yourself? Just based off that, just tell me. You know what? They tend to laugh. A lot of guys will laugh. A lot of ladies won't say too much, but they'll agree. And it's at that point I would say, you know what? I had to fall in love with me because I didn't know how to love me. And it took me to actually start to gut myself of all the problematic things that I had in my world. So what I would say to that other human being is that, let's just face it, you don't love yourself. Or you don't know how to love yourself. I get it, because I've been in and I've worn the same shoes. So now the objective for you is to do the same thing I did. Is I had to look in the mirror and actually go in there and tell myself I didn't love myself. It sounds weird, but I had to do it. And then the tide started to change. I started to look at how I function, of course, in the sexual realm. Then, because not only just taking care of yourself, getting your teeth clean, and getting a haircut and getting manicures and things of that nature, they're not the things that say you love yourself. You see that all the time. And, and AIDS is running rampant in downtown Atlanta, and they look good down there, right? So when you see a person doing that, you say, like I said, you pose that question, then you let them know you don't love yourself, man. And I get it. But you first have to start watching your behavior. Look at the model of functionality in which you're actually giving out to the world, exhibiting to the world. And then have to pose the question, who raised you? Because if no one taught you how to protect yourself in this area, because you see sex as shaking hands, and so it's like a greeting. It means nothing to you, So therefore, I know you don't care about you or nobody else. So that is the biggest thing right there. And most people tend to not come back and communicate when I tell them that. Because now I've actually told them the truth about themselves. You're allowing another human being in your body, the only body that you get, the only one. And they say the only one thing you got to protect it, but you're not protecting yourself. So it's an impossibility to love yourself, and you're doing that. So what you have are two evils playing with one another, telling themselves lies, but yet going nowhere. So that is the thing. That's where I would go. And the communication will tend to actually, drive forward after that if they're open to communicate. You know, because it took some time for me to get to the point of where I am. I had to do a lot of what they call gutting. You know, cleansing yourself of all the poverty functionality out here in this world, or what the world gave to you. And what I mean by that is that my job is not to destroy any human being that comes into my path as a man. And my job is to love you. My job is to give you the best of me as a human being. That's really it. And also to understand that we've all had a journey in life. And to use my acumen to give you what it is to help you navigate too. Because being an older person, you know, a person who's lived a little bit longer, not to say that older people know, you got a bunch of old fools out here. But being a person that can actually sit around and talk to you guys and connect and say, I've done the same shit. I've done the same detrimental things to myself. You know, I've abused me many years. And now I can sit back and say, you know what, this is how I'm protecting myself.